Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Tougies Take podcast. We are back again. Not all of us, though. Endo, where are you? How could you miss this one? I am joined, of course, by Mr. Sim for the win, and our special guest today. Long time coming on this one. I tried to debate how much to hype this up, right? Like, is it too far to say hockey royalty? It might be. But he's an Emmy winner. Seattle Kraken and Chicago Blackhawks fans will know him very well. He is the voice of the Seattle Kraken's official podcast, Signals from the Deep, and somehow, some way a fan of mine for some amount of time. I don't know how that's a thing. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nick Olczyk joining us on the show.
Tougie, that's a very gracious intro. I should start off by saying your check or your bits are in the mail, so thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. It's a big fan of you, the work you do, your content, live streaming, and I've been a big fan for a long time. And the NHL, EA Sports NHL community, which is something that I've never really delved into in terms of posting content, but I've always been a big fan of playing the games and things of that nature. So thanks a lot for having me on. And Sin, great to meet you, and looking forward to a great conversation to cover a lot of different things today.
Yeah, likewise.
I mean, today, obviously, we're going to get into, for the most part, the Metro, but we will leave plenty of time, of course, to, kind of talk about your background a bit, and especially what you do now with the Seattle Kraken. No wonder why you might be a little bit too busy for the content creation side of things. You are a man of many hats in the hockey world right now, and in general, like, I guess that's kind of where we can start things off. We'll get to some viewer questions here in a minute, because I know there are quite a few of them, especially related to the whole, job with the Kraken at this stage. But just how has that been over the last year or two at this stage now? Just the whole idea of, you kind of got your start within the Chicago organization, working with the Indy Fuel a lot. I know that. Mm-hmm. And then obviously you make this big jump to Seattle, and it's been, I mean, from what I can tell from the outside looking in, a really perfect fit, especially with what you've been able to start up with the podcast.
Yeah, it has been an unbelievable run to this point, and hopefully a run that's far from being over. For as much passion as I have for the game of hockey, it's been my life. My lovely and talented mother always says that I was born with a stick in my hands. I don't know if that's possible or sanitary, but I guess we'll go with it. But obviously, my family being in the game, my dad playing in the National Hockey League for 16 years and being one of the voices of the game for the last 17 or 18 years at both the regional, local, and then the national level too. But obviously, I mean, it was a natural progression for me to want to play hockey because my dad did, because my two older brothers did. My sister did not, but she was certainly around watching with us and things like that. But I think maybe one thing that people don't know and why I really am living my dream now with the job that I have is when I was 7, 8, 9 to like 18, before life really started to get, really, really busy, is I would play video games all the time. And the staple video game for me was EA Sports NHL, whether it was NHL 09, 10, 12, the Great 14, whatever it is. And so when I would play, I would broadcast as I played. I would do play-by-play. I would do color. I would, even after each period ended, I would give myself a little 7 or 8 minute slot to do a little intermission report and a little post-game reprieve as well. So I didn't know if I was playing the game because I loved to play the game or if because I love to broadcast. And the one thing I realized is that I couldn't play and not broadcast. So there were times where it was 2 a.m. On a summer night, and my mom comes and bangs on the door and says, go to bed. And I'm just like, I'm practicing. So it really, I think for me, was just kind of this innate passion for talking about the game of hockey, for breaking it down, for explaining it, making the complex little bit more simple and entertaining for both hardcore hockey fans and also first-time hockey fans to be able to enjoy. But I still do it from time to time. Obviously, a little bit more busy nowadays, but to kind of maybe give a little spark notes for those who might not know kind of how I got to be here in Seattle. Started playing hockey when I was real young, 3, 4, 5 years old. Moved away from home at 16 to play in the United States Hockey League for a couple of years. Ended up playing 4 years as a junior, and then moved into play Division I college hockey at Colorado College. Was there for a freshman year, was there for a sophomore year, and just kind of felt that I think my playing days had kind of run out. And I think the exciting part for me, though, that was the most difficult decision I ever had to make, was to stop doing something all I ever knew what I did for 19 or 20 years. But I always knew that, okay, even if I were somehow able to make the NHL, and I was never a star player, I was a bottom six depth guy, kill penalties, but the one thing I could do is I could win a faceoff. Now, I think if I had to create myself realistically in the game, I'd probably be a mid-70s overall. But I'll tell you what, guys, that face-off attribute, that would be pushing 90 for sure. That's the one thing. What's the one thing I could do, especially in the college days?
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. A lot of people patting their game off of the stars, and you're looking at someone like Vernon Fiddler, and it's like, that's my guy.
Yeah. Have you ever talked to Jamie Baker about this? Because that was his big thing too. How he got a lot of his ice time was, winning faceoffs and things like that.
Yeah. I have not had the pleasure of talking about that. But I do know for the games that I played in college, a lot of my shifts were 15, 20 seconds where it was win the face-off in the D zone. Once we break it out, get right off the ice and get the guys that could move and score and skate, get them on the ice. But, in my younger years, I could play. I definitely had ability, but obviously the higher you get, the pyramid gets really, really thin at the top.
Yeah.
So anyway, once I left college after my sophomore year, I really, my plan was then to go to like the best broadcasting school I could. So it was like, okay, I can go to Syracuse or USC or Northwestern, something to try and, be able to kind of take that next step. And by the time I made the decision to leave, the transfer deadline had passed, and none of those schools did like a winter start, half year start, anything like that. So I knew I was going to be a year out of going to school. So I figured, okay, how do I make the most of my time? Moved back home to Chicago and ended up linking up with the Indy Fuel of the ECHL, who were and still are owned and run by Jim Hallett, the great owner there, who gave me my first opportunity to be a broadcaster. And for 3 years there, I worked with Andrew Smith, who's been doing their games for a long, long time, Indiana hockey historian, and he helped me out an incredible amount of times in terms of allowing me to flourish and allowing me to develop the style that I have. So I ended up doing Indy for 3 years. And while I was driving down to Indy about every weekend or every other weekend during the hockey season from Chicago, about 3.5, 4 hour drive every weekend, go down and do a couple of games. During the week, I was working for NBC Sports Chicago, which was where the Blackhawk games were televised on, in the tape room, cutting highlights, adding different telestrations to goal replays. And then that would be submitted or kind of shown to the in-studio analysts that we had that night, whether it was Patrick Sharp or Jamal Mayers or Steve Conroy or so on and so forth. And then also doing some similar work with the Olympics and with TNT in that regard. And so in terms of having a background in not only broadcasting, but also what goes on in the production room, what goes on in the truck, I think has been very, very valuable for me. And getting to start with the Chicago Blackhawks, man, that was just nothing short of a dream come true. I mean, to be able to work for the team that you grew up living and dying with was super special. And obviously the circumstances were heartbreaking, with Troy Murray having gone through cancer around that time and going through treatment, and them needing to have some of his duties and roles filled. They said, hey, we'd love to give you a 3-game trial run. And that season, 3 games turned into about 40 by the end of the year, which was a dream come true, doing radio, doing a little bit of TV. And so that was certainly a real, I think, a momentous season and memorable season for me, being able to work for them and then getting the opportunity to come out here to Seattle this last season was, I mean, it was scary. I mean, if I'm being honest, it was scary because anytime you go to a new market, you got to prove yourself all over again. You're in a new place. You're 2,000 miles away from home, from family, from friends. But the Kraken organization, the Kraken fans, the community could not have made the jump any smoother. And what the team did last year, which I'm sure we'll get into, speaks for itself. And to be part of that and to be part of something that is still very much at the beginning and building here is incredibly exciting to be part of. So long-winded in terms of my career, it's been a whirlwind. I still wake up every day and pinch myself that not only am I in the National Hockey League, but I'm in the role that I've always dreamt of. I don't take it for granted. I know I'm, if not the youngest, one of the youngest to do it currently, and I take pride in that, but also know that it's a business, and you're always trying to evolve and get better and adapt, and always have your ear to the ground and your eyes open. But I'd rather be doing nothing else than any other sport in any other place. So I'm having an absolute blast so far.
I did want to ask, rewinding a little bit back to when you were a youngster and playing the game and doing your own broadcast. Did you ever record yourself doing that so you could listen back and like try to learn from that? Was that ever a thing you did, or is that because I mean, as someone who had it was in a similar vein in that sense. I used to have a little like one of those little, what was it, like a Sony playback thing, like the speaker with the mic attached to it, and I'd like record myself doing things, either playing with like my starting lineup action figures or something. So was that something that you ever did?
It was not.
Okay.
I think looking back, I maybe wish I would have. And there's always those great stories of play-by-play guys in the National Hockey League, really all of sports now, whether it's Kenny Albert or the Hall of Famer Doc Emmerich telling the stories about how you'd go sit up in the rafters of a minor league hockey game, and you'd have the voice recorder there, and he would broadcast, and then he'd go and review it. I never recorded any of the ones that I did when I was playing games. But I think once I got to working for the Indy Fuel, it became obsessive for me, where after every game I would do before I would go to sleep that night, I'd watch the whole game back. And I would pick apart different things. I'm my own biggest critic. I am always trying to improve certain things, say things a little bit differently, add to the vocabulary. But to answer your question, I did not. I kind of wish I would have now, looking back, to kind of see my progression. Because even when I go back on this very computer that we're doing this on, I'll go back from time to time and watch some of the games I broadcasted from Indy in the ECHL, or a couple games that I did for NBC for Notre Dame college hockey, and just to see kind of how far I've come in terms of being comfortable developing a style, a cadence, and everything that kind of makes me what I am in doing what I do. But I would say that's probably the earliest where I started to actually be able to kind of go back and look. But there were some long, loud, boisterous nights in my bedroom because I was having a lot of fun playing the game and doing something that I really loved.
Those were my that was one of my two big takeaways from that opening there. Was first and foremost, it's nice to know that we weren't alone in terms of the idea of playing the game and commentating over it at the same time, because that is absolutely what has led me down to this path, and that idea of like, okay, is college going to work out financially? How can I try to kind of make some inroads here? And really, if you think about it, for me, and Sin for that matter, the commentary over the video game never stopped. It's what we still do to this day.
I'm actually to the point now, even if I'm playing on my own, I find myself like doing just little bits of it, because it's just so ingrained into like how I think about the game. I have to vocalize it now.
And whenever I will say, whenever a young broadcasters or people who are interested or aspiring and trying to get into the broadcasting side of hockey, or any sport for that matter, that's always one of the first things of advice that I can give them. I say, it doesn't matter if you're a gamer, you've never played, or it's infinite practice. Like you can play at any time of the day. You can set it up how you want. Playoff game. I mean, it's so advanced now where you can, any team, you can set the lineups however you want to do it. And so that's always the advice that I try to give people, aside from studying real life broadcasters and watching real life hockey, just to be able to, even if you're just playing true broadcast camera, computer against computer and you're just bored at 2:30 in the morning, which I'm a night owl, so I often am, and just practice that way. So it really, aside from it just being a fun thing to play and to experience with friends, it can really be used as an incredible tool for broadcasters currently that are doing it for a living, and also folks that would love to get into it.
In case anyone was wondering why we still do so much AI versus AI commentary in franchise modes, now you know the reason why. It is absolutely tremendous practice. The other takeaway from that, though, is you kind of mentioning the work ethic, and I was trying to think of how to phrase this, but, you know, you're in a position where I think some people might say, you know, I don't agree with them, but the whole idea of like, all right, yep, your dad's who he is, you would have had those easier inroads. But from my perspective, it almost makes it more difficult because the pressure and expectation for someone in your position, especially someone at your age, you're still 26, if I'm not mistaken. Like, it's just that idea of, man, you have to be that much more on your game, that much more prepared, because it's almost as if you're in a spot where people are going to be waiting for, I don't want to say someone like you, but you get what I mean, to screw up and to not be good at the, you know, opportunity that you have. So I think the fact that you have that level of preparation in what you do and that level of going back and being like, okay, where can I improve here? Like you essentially had to have that. And clearly it was instilled from very early on.
Yeah, it's I have my parents to thank an incredible amount for not just the things that I have in my life, but the person that they've kind of molded me to be, where first and foremost, very at the foundation of being an Olczyk is that, you know, you treat the janitor the same as you treat the CEO, and you are better than nobody, and you earn your keep. And what you are rewarded with what you get is based solely on how hard you work to get it. From my playing days when I was young, it was, you're only on this team because of your name. Getting job opportunities, getting an opportunity to prove myself in the broadcasting side, whether it be doing NHL radio for Sports USA with Larry Kahn, who has been gracious enough to give me some great opportunities for Winter Classics and Stadium Series games, to now, you know, being able to work in the National Hockey League on a full-time basis. I am the first person to not only, I guess, admit, but more so acknowledge that, yeah, for sure, opportunities have been there, no question. But to take it a step further is that the reality in this business is that when you get in the room or a door is opened, if you don't get in that room and perform, and not just perform 1 out of 3 times, but every time, you're going to walk through that door just as quick as you walked in, but you're going out. Doesn't matter what your name is or where you come from or who vouched for you. And so I think the thing I'm most proud of is that, yeah, I've absolutely had opportunities, but I have taken an incredible amount of and put an incredible amount of pressure on myself to do something with it, because this is what I love. This is what I've always wanted to do. And I've had people try and make me feel bad because of my last name, when I think in reality, I am so proud to carry the last name Olczyk, no matter what anybody tries to make me feel or says. I'm incredibly proud. But yeah, I think anybody that comes from a family that has done some great things and has tried to give back as much as we have and my dad has, I think the real easy route is just to kind of ride the coattails or not work hard because, you know, maybe you just rest on the laurels that are opportunity or connection. But I've always tried to work really, really hard because I know, as I said earlier, and I will reiterate, just because a door is opened, just because an opportunity is given, doesn't mean the job stops there. You got to be able to get in and prove. And I think in my case, Tougie, like what you were saying, prove a little extra, right? That it's not just the name. It's not just where you come from. You actually can do the job at an elite level, game after game, opportunity after opportunity. And I think that's the one thing that I guess I'm most proud of, is that I'm never satisfied. I'm always trying to improve in every way. And I think also too, reality these days is that it doesn't matter what you say, it doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what clothing you wear, doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. There's going to be half the people that don't like you, and there's going to be half the people that do like you. And I think if you could be more concerned with the people that you do get along with, and learn from them, and also learn a little bit from the other feedback too. I think life is just a little bit better that way, and kind of understanding that. I mean, even the greatest of the greats, no matter what sport, what line of work, there are people that don't like them, and all they do is great work, and they give back, and they do all these great things. So, yeah, for sure. Like I said, I'd be the first to admit that, the position that I'm in has afforded me some incredible opportunities. But the one thing I can lay my head down on a pillow every night is that when I had those opportunities, I made the most of it, and in a humble way, in a respectful way, in a very proud way, and hope to continue to do that as my career moves along.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to it. I would even think, like, in your position, kind of to reiterate some of the points, is that it's almost like a double-edged sword. Like, some of the opportunities are there, but you almost feel like there's like a shadow over you. It's like you have to live up to your father in some way. You're carrying that name. Are they going to expect you to be as good as him? Are they going to hold you to the standard that he has been held to? And, as, a younger guy, you're still learning and really applying yourself to do that. So I would say in that regard, it can be quite difficult. Have you ever run into anything like that? Maybe higher expectations due to, who your father is?
Yeah, for sure. I think anywhere you go in the hockey world, or in life in general, there's always going to be expectation if you carry a certain name. But I think and it goes back to how I was raised, which is how we kind of started this whole topic here. I have my mom and my dad to thank, that instilled values in me, my two older brothers and my older sister. And look, at the end of the day, I just try to do what I love, treat people as best I can, give back in the ways that I can, and try and raise other people up as well. But for sure, shadow, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've felt that, but I've never allowed it to deter me from what I want to do. Because I think I've met other people in life that are in a similar position where they carry a name, and it's not like you killed someone to get the name, so you're automatically hated. It's like I am so proud to be an Olczyk, but like I didn't choose this. I didn't. It's not like I signed up for it. Here I am, and I've tried to make the best of it. I've tried to represent our family as best I can, and know that at the end of the day, we try to treat people as well as possible, and work really, really hard. But for sure, yeah, I felt a shadow, no doubt, but I have never allowed that to overcome my inner belief in myself of, okay, yeah, that's pretty special to be able to have a dad that was in the league for 16 years and knows the game, I think, better than anybody else. And as much as he knows, and the people he knows, and just being able to, when he's in town, being able to sit on that chair there as he sits on this couch here, as we're both watching that TV there, and we're watching games, and we're talking, and I'm learning, and we're giving feedback. Like, that to me is so special. So I'm so proud to hold the last name that I do. And I know it comes with expectation. I know it comes with opinion. But as I said earlier, it's half the people are going to love it, half the people are going to hate it, and you just got to kind of keep moving forward and live the best life you possibly can.
And in the meantime, now here you are with the Seattle Kraken, and that'll kind of bring us into some of the viewer questions that we have. Before we get to that, of course, we have to mention, as always, this podcast brought to you by our lovely friends at manscaped.com. I want to remind you, of course, you can use code Tougie, Tougie, for 20% off your order, and you get free shipping on top of that. Again, our lovely friends at manscaped.com, the peak, the pinnacle, the best in the world. of men's grooming. And let's get to some of these questions here, because again, I kind of mentioned like, okay, yeah, we're going to have Nick on the show. Obviously, here's what you do with Seattle. No particular order to these, but let's go through them. From Catcher, what do you guys see happening with Shane Wright this season? I think that's one of the biggest questions surrounding the Kraken this season, is what happens with their number one prospect based off of the kind of craziness from last season and trying to navigate certain rules, whether it be with the tryout or the whole CHL side of things. Obviously, he ended up getting a solid amount of playing time by the end of the season in Coachella Valley. But from your perspective right now, Nick, what is kind of the expectation for Shane Wright this season?
Well, having the pleasure of getting to talk to Shane a little bit throughout camp and having some interactions with him, I would love to start off by saying that he's such a good kid, and he wants to get better. He wants to play for the Kraken, and this is a guy that has internal motivation to the top degree. Tough year in terms of playing for a lot of different teams last year. Yeah, Kraken, Coachella Valley, Windsor, Canadian junior team, winning a gold medal. So he certainly kind of saw every end of it last year, and was faced and tasked with a lot, and still is trying to improve and get better and get more comfortable. And I think for people that might not know, if there's one thing that anybody could take away, if you're wondering about what type of kid he is, what type of work ethic he has, for all that he went through last year, including that deep run all the way to the last possible game in the Calder Cup in the American Hockey League with the Coachella Valley Firebirds, where they were defeated in overtime of Game 7 by the Hershey Bears. It was a very short summer, short window for Shane. And right before camp started, there was a rookie camp, a prospects camp. And Shane came to Seattle for it. He didn't have to. Team gave him the option. Hey, you've played a lot of hockey. You've played more than most. If you want to rest, feel free. And what did he do? He came to camp, because that's the standard that he wants to set, and kind of ingratiating himself with the rest of the rookies and the rest of the team and the city. So there's a lot of potential there. I think in his game, from what I've seen in a few of the preseason games and in training camp, when there's no hesitation in his game and when he's feeling it, he's shooting the puck. There's no, if the light is green, he's taking the aim. There's no deferring. It's more north and south than east and west. And he's really battling. And that, I think, looking at him now, he's filled out a little bit more. Obviously, there's a little bit more still to go, being so young as he is. And that's only going to happen with time. But I have liked what I've seen with the maturation process. Where he starts this year, I would go on a limb and say I think he probably starts down in Coachella Valley and continues to season, continues to mature. And then does he get a couple looks throughout the season? Does he make his way up to the team? I think I could see it happening, definitely, though the forward group is extremely deep. But from last camp to this camp, he has improved. And so that's all you're looking for Shane right now, is just step by step, day by day, keep putting one foot in front of the other and to keep improving, because the mindset and the raw talent and the hockey IQ is all there. Just need a little bit more time to kind of put it all together. But when you think of potential, it's definitely pretty high for Shane Wright.
You mentioned the prospect camp that was there. Kind of lines up for another question from AJ. One dark horse prospect to watch out for on the Kraken. And I think it's a worthwhile question for a couple of reasons, but primarily I think back to last season, the postseason run in particular, where out of nowhere, here's Tai Cartier just stepping into that lineup and making an impact. And it's that kind of idea of the differences in what Seattle have done as an expansion team compared to Vegas, and allowing a little bit more room for these prospects to step into the lineup. I mean, Matty Beniers as a Calder winner is their 1C projected for, will probably be just outright be the 1C this season. And I can't wait to see him in particular. But is there anybody then that stood out to you as, all right, keep an eye on this guy?
Yeah, 2 players stand out immediately. And then maybe I'll kind of say one that maybe people aren't really paying attention to or maybe don't know a lot of. One of them being Tai Cartier. I mean, look, he had a great year last year in Coachella Valley playing for the Firebirds. He won Rookie of the Year, by the way, in the American Hockey League. So just a phenomenal year for him. Then he joins the Kraken in the playoffs. He plays 10 games. He gets 3 goals. And when I watch him in practice and when he shoots the puck, it reminds me a lot of the Kraken's 40-goal scorer last year, Jared McCann, where the puck just it just zips right off his stick. It doesn't seem like he's putting all that flex or all that momentum into the stick. It's just on, it's off. It's quick, it's accurate. A lot of times catches the goaltender before the goaltender even knows what the heck's going on or before the goalie can even kind of get on the angle or get in position. So that's one part of his game that's going to be very sexy. But what's more impressive to me is the battle that Tai Cartier has. In preseason, he's killed a lot of penalties. So that's going to be a big portion of his game. And then should he be presented with an opportunity offensively on the penalty kill? I mean, you talk about shorthanding goals. I think he'd be able to rack up a good amount of those in his career if given the opportunity. But it's the battle level. It's to compete. He's got physicality. He plays with bite. He's got that grind in his game. So any type of style, he's going to be able to play it. And he can motor, too, with or without the puck, especially when he's busting through the neutral zone into the offensive zone. So Tai Cartier, I think, is going to play a very important role on this team this season. And I think a guy that can move up and down the lineup, right? You need him to play on the second or third line. He can do it. You need him to kind of grind it out, but also be a little bit of an offensive flair on the fourth line. I think he can bring that. Another guy we will see this year is Riker Evans. And man, oh man, is he ever smooth. He just, the heart rate, the heartbeat, it never gets too high. It's just always kind of cool, calm, collected, even when he's under pressure. So many times this preseason where he's got the puck at the blue line, and here comes the winger ready to try and knock it out, and he just makes a subtle little play, or he walks the line one way, quick little stop, back the other, little stutter step, and he's just able to make a play. Like, I think the biggest compliment that a player can be given is to say that the play never dies on your stick. You always make the next play. Not always is a big word, because everyone makes mistakes, but more times than not, Riker Evans makes the right play, and he's calm, going back for pucks, supporting the play off the rush, keeping pucks in at the blue line, outlet passes, defending off the rush. There was a play recently in a game against the Edmonton Oilers where Connor McDavid started, as he often does, behind his goal line, made a pass to Leon Draisaitl on the right wall, and then he just went 1,000 miles an hour, got the pass back, and here he's coming full speed at Riker Evans, and there's no fear. It's a good tight gap. He's up near the blue line, and he kind of forced him over towards Adam Larsson, who's a pretty damn good defenseman in his own right, who he was playing with that night. And then Lars was able to kind of shield McDavid to the outside, and then nothing ended up happening. I think that, to me, was like, okay, this kid's not scared. And where is he going to start this year? Could he use a little bit more seasoning in Coachella Valley? I don't think that that's a bad thing, so we'll have to wait and see. But those are 2 guys for me that I think are going to make impacts on the team this year. Timetable, we'll have to wait and see on that. And then one more player who impressed me in camp, in the prospects camp and in camp this year, is Carson Rakoff, player that played with the Kitchener Rangers. He's just got this real upright style, always got his head up, can really fire the puck. He can score goals. He can beat the goalie one-on-one. He's got a certain swagger and confidence when he plays. So that's, I think, a guy that I think could make an impact on this team in the next few years. But a lot of exciting prospects that this team has, and that is a huge reason why Ron Francis, the Kraken general manager, his staff, the head of scouting, Robert Cron, and all the work that they've done to be able to put the team in this position, because we know Matty Beniers is going to be the superstar moving forward. But as you guys know, not just one player is going to be able to take a team to the promised land. You need to surround them with other great players or complementary pieces or players that kind of fit the play style. And that's exactly what they've done through the draft, through free agency. But very, very exciting years in the next few, but also beyond that for the Kraken.
Yeah, I really like that you brought up Ray Kopp in particular. I've had my eye on him. I love defensemen who, as you say, they keep things simple. They don't overcomplicate things, and they don't really allow the play to die on their stick. And so many people don't necessarily notice them, but their presence is felt all over the ice. And I think it's incredibly important, as you said, to have those type of players where you're not going to necessarily see them in the highlight reels. They're not going to be quote unquote leading the team as a McDavid or Draisaitl type would, but there's such an important cog in the machine because, as you said, he's not scared of McDavid. He's going to make that simple defensive play. He'll make that simple pass. He'll be able to evade pressure. And I definitely I'm high on him. And as you said, Seattle has done a good job bringing in the supporting cast for their future while still being a good team in the present. And that's exceedingly impressive.
And I would also say too, I think with sorry, Tougie, with Riker, aside from just having that great, strong, solid, simple game, was quarterbacking the power play quite a bit through the preseason for the Kraken too. So this is a guy that I think in his prime, you talk about projection, you talk about potential. This is the type of guy that is going to be a first pairing defenseman who is and has the capability to run a power play. So the offensive upside being there as well. So exciting days now and moving ahead with a lot of good young players for this team.
And I think that kind of leads into the final question that we have here. From Hawks, what are the vibes like in Seattle right now after the season they just had? And I think you can kind of already deduce from Nick's previous answers of just the optimism that's there. And like Sin mentioned, the idea of, they have such a solid team right now, having made the playoffs without having to leverage the future. They still have essentially their full house of draft picks moving forward that they can choose to play with if they want to. But it is already such a deep team.
And I think a great mix of young guys and elder skatesmen, I guess we'll call them, or more experienced players. And a lot of Stanley Cup champions too in that dressing room. And I just look at like the top line. You've got Jared McCann, Matty Beniers, and Jordan Eberle. You got different players, play a little bit of a different way, but they have that predictability, they have that anticipation, they have that connection now that they've played together long enough. And Jordan Eberle's impact on Matty Beniers, I think, is something that cannot be underestimated or understated. They sit next to each other in the locker room. That wasn't just a coincidence. Jordan Eberle, a consummate professional, as he has been throughout the entirety of his career. And you think about a guy like Jaden Schwartz, too, the doctor of fundamentals, I like to refer to him as, because he is Mr. Consistent. You want a puck to get out along the wall. You want a dirty play in terms of getting in there, getting in the grind, not being afraid. Though he's not a huge guy, he can do that, and winning a Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues and being able to score and being a guy that keeps the room a little bit loose and light when you need that, those types of times too. And you look to the back end of a guy like Adam Larson, who's played in the league a long time, and he has just excelled in being on a top pairing defenseman along with Vince Dunn, who has really had an incredible time here in Seattle with a phenomenal year, gets a well-deserved payday in the offseason, going to be here for 4 years, a real important part of the blue line. But just such a really good mix, I think, for this team from the forward group in terms of depth. And another thing I should probably bring up is the waiver wire pickup of Eli Tolvanen last year. And he comes in and he joins the Kraken. He plays 48 games in the regular season. He gets 16 goals, 4 on the power play, 3 game winners. And to get that guy for free, and he's, again, under contract this year, like that's just another heck of a pickup to be able to complement this team and add to the depth. Because I think for me, teams, not just that have a lot of talent, but the best teams in the league come at you in waves. And it's not just the first line and then the second line and then the third and the fourth line just kind of go out there and kind of dilly-dally. There needs to be a threat there. At times, they need to be able to kill the clock, just make the simple plays. And there has been some turnover on the roster this year. You lose Daniel Sprong, who had over 20 goals last year. You lose Ryan Donato. You lose Morgan Geekie. But when I look at the potential, I will say, potential fourth line, when you look at Brandon Tanev, Pierre-Edouard Belmar, and Kyler Yamamoto, or whoever's going to be playing on that fourth line, if it's John Hayden, Tai Cartier, whoever it might be, and you get a centerman, Pierre-Edouard Belmar, who can really win faceoffs. And that was a tough part for the Kraken last year, where they really struggled at the faceoff dot. To be able to get a veteran presence like that in, who's going to kill penalties, he's going to win faceoffs, and he's going to be great in the room. You're continuing to build the roster, build the team, and kind of create that necessary camaraderie to be able to come at other teams in waves, knowing that it's not just the Beniers line, it's not just Burakovsky, it's not just Bjorkstrand that are going to be threats to score and to play good hockey, but it's also going to be the third line of whether it's Yanni Gord, or you look to the fourth line with I think in some regards some improvement there, and then lastly goaltending too. I mean, Philip Grubauer going into this season, he's looked great. Let me rephrase that. He's looked phenomenal in camp. He's looked awesome in the preseason games that he's played. He had a great summer, and just a lot to look forward to for this team. Now, I will say, talking to people around town and around the league, the expectation and the standard has been set. It's playoffs. And I think that's where it should be, because of how deep this team is, how good this team is, and how close this team is in the dressing room in terms of their chemistry. A lot of buzz in the city. I think the amount of people that have asked me for tickets, probably from here to like Alaska, which is good because we want more fans. We want more people wanting to go to the games. But I'm very, very excited. Aside from loving what I do, guys, I just can't wait to see what this team does this season.
I think too, you kind of mentioning the depth throughout the lineup. It just brings you back to, well, the team that won the Stanley Cup this past summer, that being Vegas. And yes, you have the star power of a Jack Eichel, of a Mark Stone. They do not win the cup without the Mike Amadios, the Brett Howdens, the Keegan Colasars filling out that bottom six. And like you said, being difficult to play against every shift, as opposed to just taking up ice time while the Stars rest.
Yeah, I'll also bring up the fact that I find it quite interesting that you pick up Belmar, and he was on that very early Vegas team too, that when that first year when they went that Miracle Cup run. It's clear that he's really viewed as not just a good locker room guy, but a culture builder, because the Kraken are still a very new franchise, still kind of molding their own identity and culture and stuff like that. And I think it's very telling when you bring in a guy like Belmar, who has very, very recently shown that he's one of those good, not only just locker room guy, but a guy to build the culture around, and who you can find that success and that poise in the playoffs with.
And 38 going on 25. And I mean that in the most complimentary, respectful way, how he's able to galvanize teammates, how quickly he's fit in, which is a very great sign, because it's an amazingly welcoming group of guys. And I think he's going to be very, very important for this team this year, being able to put out your fourth line late in the game, trusted in the defensive zone, which maybe isn't always the case, or wasn't always the case last year for the Kraken. Well, now this year, if you got Pierre-Edouard Belmar out there, who is a defensive specialist, you're going to be able to put him out there in a lot of different situations. So I think it's a great signing. He's gelled awesome so far. And I think another guy that will be pivotal if this team wants to accomplish some great things this season.
I will say, I know the Bruins play the Kraken at TD Garden February 15th. About time you're in town for that one, I'll have to make the trip down, or even better, I know they head to Seattle on February 26th, and I might have to see if I can make something happen there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So obviously, we could sit here and talk about the Kraken for the duration of this podcast, and I'll already, throw the line out there of, hey, later on this season, I'd love to kind of get an update with you. But we wanted to talk about some of the other teams as well, especially in the Metro. But before that, there is actually another Pacific Division team that's in the news today, and that is because the Anaheim Ducks have re-signed RFA Jamie Drysdale to a 3-year deal at a $2.3 million cap hit. This just a few days after, dare I say, finally re-signing Trevor Zegras. I think that RFA status went on for a little bit longer than a lot of people thought, but he was also signed to a 3-year deal at 5.75. I had said on this show previously that I did not know what Pat Verbeek was doing. And it turned out that this was a very similar situation to what had happened with Jim Nill and the Dallas Stars, because last offseason we were going through okay, when are they going to sign Robertson and Ottinger, and how's that going to play out? And eventually they did, and they were both signed to sweetheart deals. I mean, Jason Robertson's making 7 something, and man, that kid should be making over 10 million. Jason Robertson is an amazing player. And I view this for the Ducks as well as a gigantic win for somebody like Pat Verbeek as a GM to lock down 2 players, 22 and 21 years old, respectively, to these contracts over the next 3 years. A very important 3 years for the Ducks as they see now how this new crop of talent pans out and kind of what that next era will be, especially after drafting Leo Carlsson 2nd overall. I mean, you're talking about a potential future of Zegras and Carlsson down the middle, which is very promising.
Don't forget about McTavish either.
McTavish is there too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nick, any thoughts on what the Ducks are building?
Yeah. It's been pretty clear with what Pat Verbeek has done, or in some cases not done, with the vision that he has for the Anaheim Ducks moving forward. But anytime you can get those players locked up for a little while longer, you know that the next deals that those guys sign, whether it's with Anaheim or elsewhere, that's where the big money and the mega money is gonna come in terms of financials and term and stability. But in terms of both of those players, I think respectively, look, I think it's great to have Trevor Zegras in the game in terms of the energy that he brings, the enthusiasm, getting people involved. You can't argue with the raw and pure skill that he possesses on a lot of different occasions, able to make something happen when nothing's going on. And obviously one of the most marketable talents we have in the great game of hockey today. So it's great to see him in that market. Because as we've seen in other cities, to have superstars on teams, it's important, especially in places where, I really don't know if there's a kind of a non-traditional hockey market anymore. Obviously I know the Anaheim Ducks won a Stanley Cup back in the early 2000s, and they get great turnouts there when the team has been good. But I think it's great to have him in that market, selling the game. In California and in that area of the United States, and I just can't speak to how great it is to have him in the game and to have him down there for a little bit longer. That being Zegras, and for Jamie Drysdale, one of the smoothest skating defensemen I've seen in a long time, and a guy that can kind of really do it all. And as you continue to build in Anaheim, it's going to be very intriguing to see some of the steps that this team takes. I think it's going to be a battle of a year for them, especially when you look at the other teams in the Pacific Division. It's going to be a hell of a division, I think. But I think really nice to see both those players staying there and obviously getting the deals done before the season started. Because, when it goes down to the wire, both parties are sweating, both parties. And because at the end of the day, no matter how much you want dollars and cents and play that game, these guys want to play hockey. That's the one thing I know for sure. And it's just great, I think, for the game and obviously for the Ducks to be able to see these deals get done sooner than later.
Now, while you don't have too many direct ties with the Metro Division, like I said, I'm perfectly okay with talking about, in my opinion, every division is intriguing this year, but the Metro especially, because I feel like there's a lot of teams in the conversation that people have been waiting to kind of see fall off for a little bit that always seem to kind of stay in the mix and in the conversation. And I wanted to go kind of in reverse order from where they finished, worst to best from last season. and just kind of give those general thoughts on the team and whether or not we think they will do a little bit better, a little bit worse, maybe about the same heading into this year. Which brings us to the Columbus Blue Jackets, who I don't know if anything's interesting, if anything interesting has happened with them lately. It's been a pretty quiet off season in Columbus, only talking about future prospect development, maybe Patrick Laine playing center. They drafted Adam Fantilli. And I can't think of anything else that may have been a distraction for for this off season. Is this bit getting over? I don't know. What a weird team. Like, they were decimated by injuries last year, so by default you'd think they would have a better year. But I'm really intrigued to see just how the entire Mike Babcock situation plays out for this team, because there is a really good chance that it could be a kind of moment that just brings this team together to say, all right, we're putting that behind us. Everyone focus on what we're doing this season.
That's kind of where I was headed, Tougie. And I think in this type of situation, which was extremely unfortunate, and something that, right decision was made, had to be made. I look at this, and one quote comes to mind for me is that the true colors of someone or some team or some city are shown not when times are good, but when times are tough. And obviously a very tough time for the Columbus Blue Jackets. But I think I would co-sign what you're selling. I think this could be a rallying cry for them. They've got some good young pieces. When you think of Cole Sillinger and obviously Adam Fantilli, I mean, wow, like some of the highlights and goals that he was able to score in the prospect camp and in preseason, and certainly being a huge part of their future. And Patrick Laine, who, who isn't a fan of him shooting the puck? No matter what position he's playing, that's the type of guy you want shooting. And so, while it is a very, very monumentous division, to put it lightly, in terms of teams that I think will make the playoffs and are going to get over 100 points, which we'll get into as we go through the process here. Just a really tough summer for them. But I think it very well could be a rallying cry, or something that kind of brings the guys together and say, hey, it's us against the world, and let's try and make the most of the season.
Yeah, the thing that I really like as I'm looking up and down their roster is that they're mixing, they have a good mix. They don't of like young and like in their prime type of guys, but the one thing that really intrigues me, they only have one person on the team who is, at least on Cap Friendly that I'm looking at, is 31 years old, and that's Eric Branson. That's actually the oldest player on their team. So it seems like they have like a really good, a really good core that's they're not really on a time limit, and that's got to take a little bit of the pressure off of some of these guys and a little bit off of management as well. But at the same time, you did sign Johnny Gaudreau. You have Patrick Laine with this year and just 2 more after being paid that 8.7. So you still want to make something happen, but they're not really in too much danger of like huge performance declines from a lot of their lineup.
Yeah, I can only agree with that. It's funny about Fantilli too. When I was in Vancouver visiting the EA Studios 2 months ago, he was there on their synthetic ice in their capture studio going over some stuff. I think he got his head scan for the video game that day too. And he's listed at 6'2", 195 on Cap Friendly. I wouldn't be surprised if he's bigger than that. I mean, he was next to Rasmus Dahlin, and Dahlin's a easily big guy too, but yeah, Fantilli just looked like a hoss. I mean, that's the only way to put it. I think like the physicality that he is going to bring for the Blue Jackets might surprise some people, because you look at like his scoring record of 65 points in 36 games as a freshman at Michigan last year, which is nuts, by the way. That's insane. Yeah. And then the extras that he can bring beyond that point production. There's quite a few people in the mix for the Calder this year. I'd be shocked if he's not a finalist. At the same time, I would be excited to see just how good someone has to be so that Adam Fantilli wasn't a top 3 rookie this year at the very least. And I think that rookie class in general is a very exciting one. The Philadelphia Flyers. finished 7th last season, 75 points, 31 wins, as they continue to kind of overgo that rebuild now with Danny Briere at the helm. Obviously, I think, the expectations are low this season, but at the same time, they do have some younger guys in the mix that you kind of look towards, the Tyson Forsters, the Cam Yorks of the world. But they still have kind of a lot of those looming questions of, all right, what's the future of a Sean Couturier? Like, if he's healthy enough and can stay healthy, does the team inquire about him? Maybe not, but what does that mean for Philadelphia then if he can stay healthy? Because he is a phenomenal player when healthy. The biggest question is not Cam York, excuse me. I just love Cam York. Got to bring him up as much as I can. Carter Hart, and how his name for the past 2-3 years has consistently been out there. As like, all right, is he Philly? Is he their guy? Is he going to stay? He's 25 years old now, an RFA at the end of the year. You would think they'd want to get rid of that looming question as quickly as they possibly could. It's either commit to the guy or try to work something out.
Yeah, this is an interesting team for me because they're going through an obvious rebuild, both on the ice and off the ice. And someone I know quite well, that being Keith Jones, who is now the president of the Philadelphia Flyers, and a guy who I think is pushing the right buttons in terms of how the transformation of the Philadelphia Flyers into this kind of next stage as they do go through this rebuild. I think aside from just the on ice and the roster and the projection, I think they've gone about things the right way in terms of admitting or saying, hey, it's going to take some time. And I think at the end of the day, all you can really do is be as honest as you can with the fans. Now, you're not going to be able to tell everybody everything, right? I mean, it's just like it's the CEO of the company isn't going to be able to tell all the staff members and all the employees every little thing about the company, good or bad. But with the job that Keith Jones has done so far, with the job that Danny Briere has done as well, and how well they've seemingly worked in unison, there's a lot of hope, and there should be a lot of hope for Flyers fans moving forward with some of the young players that they have. Tougie, as you had mentioned perfectly. And some veterans, too, that they have on their roster that if they can stay healthy are going to be really important for when they do inject some of those young guys into games this year, that they're going to have some players that they can rely upon and learn from, not just in game, but in practice and learning what it takes to be an everyday pro, because they do have some of those good players. And that is a great question about Carter Hart. Is he going to be there long term? Do they look to move him and try and stack up on some picks or maybe a young player, take a shot that way? But it's going to be a while for the Philadelphia Flyers, I think, before they are a consistently competitive team. But I think to get there, they've already taken the initial steps, aside from just putting the people they think in place, is that saying, okay, it's going to take time, and we're going to go about it as best we can. And obviously having a coach like John Tortorella is really going to set the standard, because if you don't abide, you're going to be weeded out very, very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And I do kind of find their lineup a bit interesting in the sense that, like, when they are going to be competitive, you're going to kind of see almost like a tiered lineup. You know, you mentioned you're going to have some of those veterans still. Couturier is not going to be going anywhere. He's still, my opinion, one of the better two-way centers in the game. And then they have, like, you know, the prospect crop from like the Konechny. You got Farabee and Frost in that sort of group. And they've also taken into their lineup some cast-offs from some of the other teams. You know, you think of Owen Tippett or Ryan Poehling and things like that. And as you said, with the new injection of young talent that's going to be coming within these next few years, I think when they are ready to be competitive, they should have a good mix of veterans, prime, and the young energy type guys to make the impact, hopefully, that they're going to be looking to make. But yeah, I mean, biggest question mark is Carter Hart. And I do have to say, I haven't really agreed with how they've handled the situation where they're constantly dangling his name out there like, oh yeah, he's probably maybe available. And I think with what Carter Hart's already kind of been through, that's got to be a little bit tough, especially on a goaltender who we already know have so much pressure on them.
That's a fair point. We'll get to the team that finished above them this past season, a team that could be kind of in the opposite situation. You know, Philadelphia trying to bottom out and build back up. the Washington Capitals are one of the two big teams of this division that people have been waiting to see fall for a while. And it finally happened this past season where they missed the playoffs for the very first time in a long time at this stage. And the question now is, can they bounce back and get to where they once were? Or is this, have we seen the beginning of the end here? Alex Ovechkin, now 38 years old, still had 42 goals last year, because of course he did, barring drastic injury or the Father Time quickly calling out of nowhere instead of that gradual player decline. Maybe it's just, all right, here we go. We've hit that decline. If that doesn't happen, you always want to give Washington a chance with one of the greatest players of all time and the guy who will go down as the greatest goal scorer of all time on the roster. But I guess that's the big question, is now that you've had that season off, we've seen that a few times. You missed the playoffs, but that extra rest, especially for a team with some older players, can be really beneficial that following season to try and push again.
Yeah, this is another interesting team, I think, for a lot of different reasons. When you think about getting a healthy Nicholas Backstrom, obviously Alexander Ovechkin is always a shoo-in in terms of what you're going to get from him. And I would love to, before we move on to the next team, I would love to pose a question to you guys about Ovi. So we'll get to that. But this team, a notable player on this team now, that being Max Pacioretty, I think is going to bring some goal scoring. He's been in the league a long, long time. But again, you look in goal, Darcy Kemper. He's had some good success in his career, but is this a guy that's going to be able to be that tried and true, trusted number one, playing 60 games? We'll have to wait and see. But I think a team that, if I am projecting or trying to place them at the end of the year, I think they'll probably kind of be, at least to me, in a very similar spot as to where they finished last year, because the higher we go and the more we talk in this division, it just gets so tough. When you think about the teams that finished a little bit higher last year and what I think will be by the end of this season. But you got some good veterans. You got a couple of young players, some questions in goal. But for this Washington Capitals team, I think as the grade 8 goes, so do they. And, it's not, the same team that they were, a few years back. Obviously, they're going through whether you want to call it a retool or something of that nature, but they still have some really good players that are going to make it exciting for Capitals fans to watch this team throughout the course of the year.
So that next team that you referred to,
and I will say too, Tougie, sorry, before we move on, the question I want to ask you guys is,
well, that's what I was going to say is, what's the question before we get to them?
Do you think 8 catches 99?
Yeah, I do. Again, right now, as it stands, he is how many behind? Let's get that updated number. He is at 822, and Gretzky finished at 894. Ovechkin is 38 years old. I mean, in theory, if he can stay on that 40-goal pace, it's less than 2 seasons.
30-goal pace, he should hit it with his contract, and he's signed for the perfect amount. I want him to. I hope he does. And I defy anyone who doesn't want him to. I think records are made to be broken, and the only thing you worry about is his supporting cast, especially as you mentioned the Backstrom's health questions. Like, he is still a guy who he can't create out of nothing like he used to. The wheels are starting to go. He's still ridiculous. I mean, he'll get 10, 15, 20 power play goals still, but how is he going to do 5-on-5 with the supporting cast, I think, is the biggest question. But I think and I hope he still finds a way to break it.
Yeah, and you still have John Carlson there too, and getting Kuznetsov, right? And those are some good players that I'll be able to work with. But I'm with you guys. I think there is no shot that Alexander Ovechkin gets to within 50 goals, and says, I'm okay. There's no way.
Way too competitive for that.
Like even if he gets 40 this year, and then the next year he gets 10, or he has a rough year, whatever. There's no way. And I don't know him, but from his competitiveness and what we know about him, watching him, the greatest goal scorer of this generation, and very well could be sooner than later of all time, I just don't see it of him just saying, yeah, I'm 28 goals away. I'm not feeling it anymore. There's no chance. So I think he does it. And I'm totally with you, Sin. I think it is so good for the game. Wayne Gretzky has come out multiple times and said how much he's been advocating for Alex Ovechkin to break his record. And I could just imagine the countdown when he gets to within 10, and how not just the hockey world, but the world is going to have their eyes in. And every goal he gets a little bit closer. And it's going to be so special, I think, for the game. But I just don't envision there being any way that Ovi says, I'm going to ride off into the sunset without having done it, because I think he's got all the tools to be able to do it. And the last thing I will say on Alexander Ovechkin is, aside from the goals, aside from the spectacular highlights that are going to live forever, when you look at his statistics year in and year out, he has been remarkably durable. His durability rating is 199. Let alone just 99. I mean, it seems like every season in his career, it's been 80 games, 78 games, 82 games, 81 games. And that, now earlier in his career, he was a lot more physical than he is now. But for the style that he's played, and for as much as he's been targeted over his career, I think of all the great things he's done, for me, his durability will go down as one of the most impressive traits that he possesses.
Yeah, I think he had that slight advantage over.
You're talking about the last shot for someone to break Gretzky's record for at least another 8 to 10 years. There is nobody in the top 200 right now, all-time career goals, that's still active, that has a chance. Someone like Steven Stamkos already has over 1,000 games played and has had the wear and tear. Like, it's not going to happen. So then you start looking at guys who are trying and are on the brink of cracking 200 in terms of being in the top 200 all time in terms of goals. The Draisaitl's, the McDavids, Pasternak, Matthews. And even then, you might have to look beyond that to the Bedard era before you really have someone who might be able to get that close. And you kind of mentioned just how close he is at this stage and what happens once he gets closer. And we saw that this past season in the NBA with LeBron James, as they were counting down, okay, here he goes, getting that much closer to the all-time scoring record in the NBA. I'm old enough to remember Barry Bonds and all the Giants games at the time being broadcasted right on ESPN for everyone to watch, and every home run, it was, oh my God, he's that much closer. And it's magic. Like you said, it doesn't just capture the hockey audience. It captures the sports world in general to have something, a record like that was previously thought to be untouchable, be threatened, if not surpassed. So just for the sake of the sport, I hope that it happens. We still have 5 teams left to discuss here. I know we're getting a little bit low on time because, hey, surprisingly, the 3 of us, can you believe 3 people such as us could be long-winded and have a lot of thoughts and opinions? So I'll kind of just, breeze through these 5 teams in a sense, and then we can kind of touch up upon the 5 in whatever way we choose to. The Pittsburgh Penguins finished in 5th last season, missing the playoffs again for the first time. If not mistaken, it was the first time in the Crosby era, really. Obviously, huge offseason for them. Kyle Dubas comes over from Toronto. They acquire Riley Smith from the Vegas Golden Knights, among other players, including one Erik Karlsson from the San Jose Sharks. That little chestnut of a deal there. General thoughts on the Penguins heading into this season, and I think for the 3 of us, we could try to keep it short. We could try. We might not succeed. But thoughts on the Penguins heading into this year?
I really wonder how the partnership, or maybe lack thereof, is going to go between Erik Karlsson and Chris Letang. Who's going to get more power play one time quarterbacking it? Who's going to play on the first pair? Who's going to play on the second pair? I think that's definitely a storyline, but it's hard to argue with what Kyle Dubas has done when he's gone in there. You mentioned the name Riley Smith. I mean, that's a huge get and kind of almost a reworking of the roster. You lose Jason Zucker. But whenever you have Sidney Crosby, whenever you have Evgeny Malkin, you always got a chance to win. Not overly sold on their goaltending. Tristan Jarry, is he going to be a guy that's going to be able to have a good enough year and a consistent enough year to get them into the playoffs and then be great in the playoffs? I'm not so sure. But the one thing you do know is that Sid, Gino, Karlsson, Letang, so on and so forth, they're going to be right there. They're going to be in the mix.
Sin, any thoughts on the Penguins, or you want me to move on?
Yeah, I think it could be beneficial for Letang to get a few less minutes now. I think he's said,
what's funny is
it's all good. I welcome Erik Karlsson, but it's always
apparently
easier.
California's internet structure can be a little bit hit or miss, and there he goes. We did lose him. We'll see if he joins back up, but I'm sure he'll be happy. He at least got through the first hour plus of this show without that. The New York Islanders finished in 4th last season, made the playoffs, a team that's always touted as like, oh man, if they can just make the playoffs, they have that type of squad to go far. Didn't work out last season, despite the trade for Bo Horvat. This offseason was an interesting one, as you re-signed Bo Horvat and Barzal and a lot of players to long-term contracts. That seems to have been the Lou Lamoriello way, but I still can't count them out because I can't help but label Ilya Sorokin the best goaltender in the world right now for my money. We've had the conversation on the show, if it's Game 7 Stanley Cup Final, who you're taking, and the answer is probably Andrei Vasilevsky. But if you had to ask me, like, okay, who's that one goalie that you can get to kind of lead that team night in and night out? For me, it's Sorokin, so I have a really hard time counting them out.
Let me rephrase that. If you don't have goaltending, you're not going to win in the National Hockey League. And when you have a guy like Ilya Sorokin that can steal games and bring that consistent effort to give your team a chance to win every game and give you 5 or 6 or 7 goalie wins throughout the course of the 82-game stretch, you're going to be in the mix. Can they get enough scoring? Well, that's where Bo Horvat and Matthew Barzal are going to have to come through. But just looking up and down their roster, you got some good depth players when you look at Casey Cizikas and Cal Clutterbuck. And then you go a little bit down further. I mean, Anders Lee has always been very consistent player for them in terms of production and obviously meaning what he does to the locker room. And then you look at the back end for this Islanders team, and Adam Pelech, Ryan Pulock, a really good pairing there, strong, stout. But I think this team lives and dies with the goaltending. And can Ilya Sorokin replicate and exceed what he did last year? That'll certainly be a big task. And if this team wants to accomplish this year in terms of getting to the playoffs, Ilya Sorokin is going to have to be the biggest piece of the puzzle, I think.
You have the New York Rangers as well, and welcome back, Sin. You are here with us as we get to talk about your favorite team, the Rangers, your favorite defenseman in the NHL, Adam Fox. We'll see again. He might be still having some issues on his side of things. But in talking about the Rangers, they are one of those teams that have been kind of stuck in that grouping of, all right, we're waiting to see it in the playoffs. Yeah. And they still have the roster that could do it. The core guys of Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, obviously someone like Fox leading the way defensively. And then you get the younger talents, the Lafrenières, the Capocacos, who might not have been able to kind of hit that expectation of a first and a second overall pick, but are still contributors to this team. You get the veteran presence now of a Blake Wheeler on league minimum, which is crazy to me. Oh, and then, you still have one of the best goaltenders in the world in Igor Shesterkin. It's another team where if you were to tell me right now on October 5th that the New York Rangers are going to win the Stanley Cup, I'm not going to be shocked.
Yeah, there is a lot of cases to be made, I think, for the top 3 teams. Maybe you could stretch it to 4, but for sure the top 3 teams in the Metro that have Stanley Cup aspirations to be lifting Lord Stanley in June of 2024. And I think when I look at the New York Rangers and I look at strength, I look at the back end, and you say the name Adam Fox, as dynamic as it gets, as versatile as it gets. And then Jacob Trouba, who is the ultimate want him on my team, don't want to play against him, with bringing that great leadership in the room. And kind of similar to what we were talking about with Sorokin, obviously a little bit more support, more firepower that the Rangers have to be able to support a great goaltender like Igor Shesterkin. And I think this team has a lot of things going for it, and up front too. I mean, Kreider, Zibanejad, Panarin, what a line that is going to be this season. And can the kids come through? Can they continue to take the next step? Lafreniere, Capo Caco, so on and so forth. And 2, new coach in Peter Laviolette, who is now coaching his 5th team in the Metro Division. So he knows that division like the back of his hand. And all the success that he's had in his career, 1,430 games with over 750 wins. The record speaks for itself. So that's also going to be a big part of whether this team can have a successful run, not just in the regular season, but when they do get to the postseason, which I think they will for sure. And so we'll have to wait and see. But they certainly have all the makings, I think, that it takes to be a really competitive team, a good team. From the start of the year to the midpoint and into the end, and then into the playoffs. When you look at the firepower they have up front with Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, Lafreniere, and then the back end with a guy who I haven't mentioned yet, who I think is as tough and mean as a defenseman as we do have in the National Hockey League, that being Keandre Miller. They've kind of got a little bit of everything, including the goaltender. So this will be certainly a team that I am going to be very excited to watch as this year commences.
All right. Before we ran into a tech issue, we'll see how smooth I can make the audio on that. We were going to mention the New Jersey Devils and the Carolina Hurricanes as the top 2 teams from the Metro last season. The Devils, beyond exciting in what they were able to kind of accomplish last year and only looking to be better. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, they get Tyler Toffoli for a discount. You have Timo Meier sticking around long term, which is huge for them. But you're talking about another team where it's like, all right, the goaltending. What are we going to see? Can Akira Schmid replicate what he did last season, especially when they're going head-to-head with some of the other teams in the division we've already talked about, and the Carolina Hurricanes, who perhaps above anybody else in the NHL have been viewed as that team of when are you going to get to that next level? You're talking about a team that's now been swept in the conference finals in 3 straight appearances, or at least their last 3 appearances, obviously not 3 straight years, but they are still an incredibly well-built team. They add Dmitry Orlov on the blue line. Again, you can't really envision a scenario where Carolina's not in that mix of being a contending team.
This is an exciting team, obviously, but I think now that the expectations are where they are for the New Jersey Devils, this is where we're going to get a real good look of what exactly this team is made of. Tougie, you bring up a great point in terms of goaltending, as we established when talking about the Islanders and the Rangers, where if you don't get goaltending, you're not going to have a very good opportunity to win on a consistent basis, at least. Schmid, Vitek, Vanacek, are those guys going to be able to replicate what they did last year in tandem in the regular season and come playoff time? But this roster, it's hard to argue where you look at the back end. You got Dougie Hamilton there, who is one of the better D in the National Hockey League when you talk about offensive capability. And up front, too, what a year last year for Jack Hughes, right? 99 points, all sorts of notoriety for that, and rightfully so. Nico Hischier, who I think for me really kind of had a bit of a coming out party in terms of kind of proving, I can not only be a good two-way player, but I'm going to be able to put up 80 points and be one of the better centers in the league. So this is a very exciting team. And another guy, too, that caught my eye from his first couple of games has been Dawson Mercer, a guy that can flat out fly. He could score. If he gets 25 or 30 goals this year, if he pushes 30, I'm not going to be surprised at all, because he's got those intangibles of a great shot, but also goes to the hard areas and is not fearful, and he's not a perimeter player. And oh, by the way, I think for the third time, he's pretty fast too. So this is obviously a very exciting team, and they're going to be right there. I think it's going to be neck and neck between them and the Carolina Hurricanes. But when you compare the teams, very different time frames, I think, right? Carolina Hurricanes have been one of the best teams in the league here for the last couple of years. New Jersey Devils, they're on the come up, and their top players are very much, I wouldn't even say they're in their prime yet. I mean, they're coming into it, and I think it's a very, very valuable playoff experience last year for some of those top players for the New Jersey Devils. So again, they're going to be right there. I think it's going to be 1 and 2, them and the Carolina Hurricanes. Who ends up topping who? That'll play itself out, but a team that certainly has a lot going for it. And now I can't emphasize enough how important that playoff experience was for them last season.
Sin, is Dawson Mercer still a sore spot, given he did not go to the Sharks in the Timo Meier trade?
Yeah, I mean, he's incredible. It makes sense. You don't want to give him up. He's a big part of your team. I'm still happy with who we got in the deal, but also, I'm interested to see if Nemec is going to start working his way onto that roster too. I mean, the Devils' defense is pretty good. Oh, what was the name of that kid that they had on the back end in the playoffs? He was big and
Kevin Ball.
Blank. Thank you. Yes. He. I mean, already, like they still have a lot. I don't think they're extremely stacked on the back end, so I could see a place for Nemec being able to come in at least maybe midway point of the season if he doesn't make that lineup and make an impact or something like that. Like, I don't know, like he's probably still playing in Europe. That's probably where he'll be, but I think there's a place for him if he would be ready.
Yeah, that's a fair point. With that, Nick, thank you so much for your time today. This was a lot of fun, and I think clearly we discovered that we might need an even earlier start for the next time. So I thought we'd have plenty of time to get through everything we wanted to get through, and we still made it. But obviously, having to shortchange some topics a little bit. But this was a lot of fun, and it was great to finally have you on the podcast here. And you are more than welcome back at any time.
Tougie, Sin, thank you guys so much. This was a lot of fun for me. Would love to come back on whenever. We can talk hockey, we can talk video games, whatever floats our boat. But you guys keep up the great work. Thanks again a lot for having me. And I know one thing's for sure is that the hockey community and the EA Sports, NHL, and gaming community is better for having you guys in it. So keep up the great work, and looking forward to a wonderful season ahead.
With that, of course, you can catch Nick on the Signals from the Deep podcast, available on, your audio platform of choice, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the whole deal there. Nick, anything else aside from the podcast there to promote?
Well, if you want to watch the Kraken and you want to see me spout some stuff that may or may not be useful, I guess depending on who's watching or listening, all of our games are on Root Sports, which you can find on ESPN Plus. If you ever want to watch the Kraken games, watch the Kraken feed. So, Signals from the Deep is a podcast. Looking forward to diving even deeper into that this year. And it's been just an incredible run so far. So can't wait to get this season going. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, go Kraken.
There you go. With that, of course, you can catch Sin on the Twitter side of things at SinFTWProd, on the YouTube side of things at Sin for the Win Productions. Of course, NHL 24 content out in full force. Sin, what do you have going on that side of things?
Yeah, doing the Boston Bruins franchise mode, and That's been a blast so far, as well as a be a pro career mode too. And I got some other things coming down the pipeline, but those are the two main things that I have got to start with every year.
Fun fact, I also have a Bruins franchise that I'm going to try to keep up with. We didn't get into too much NHL 24 talk today. It's because we wanted to keep this as a positive podcast. But hey, there's hope for the future, right? I hope so, at the very least. You can catch me everywhere at Tougie 24, of course. I'm sure you know that. Again, a gigantic thank you to Mr. Nick Olczyk for joining us here, and we will see you all next week. It's the start of the NHL season, and the Bruins still have Pavel Zacha as their 1 seed.